and welcome back to Dukascopy TV. Now, one of the main topics discussed at the G8 over the weekend was the ever-souring relationship between the West and Iran. The G8 leaders have told the government in Tehran that they will be tapping into emergency stockpiles as part of tougher sanctions against the country. Well, with me in the studio at the moment is Dr. Christian Koch from the Gulf Research Center Foundation. Thanks very much for coming into the studio, Christian.
Pleasure to be here.
Obviously, like I said in the introduction, the G8 leaders are talking about introducing tougher sanctions over Iran's nuclear ambitions. Post G8 summit, what's the latest on Iran from your point of view, as they are a main oil provider?
Oh, absolutely. Well, tougher sanctions are already in place, and that's one of the reasons that we possibly are seeing some movement in the debate over the nuclear issue with Iran. We have a critical meeting coming up in 2 days' time in Baghdad, when the 5+1, which includes then Germany and members of the UN Security Council, will get together for another round of talks with the Iranians on how to resolve this issue at the moment. Last month at talks in Istanbul, which were the first talks in over a year, the Iranians showed a relatively willingness to come together and maybe be more constructive in the talks. And this has given a little bit sense of a hope that actually some deal might be in the works that could resolve this issue. That in terms of lessening some of the sanctions on Iran, Iran would provide more transparency in terms of its enrichment facilities. It would stop its production of uranium at 20% and would possibly even ship some of that material out of the country to ease concerns that the Iranians are moving towards a military application of nuclear weapons. So it's a critical meeting coming up on Wednesday, and that will pave the way to see, are we going to face an easing of tensions in the region, which then again has an impact on oil prices, or are we going to see a return to the tensions that we had at the beginning of the year, where it looked very much likely that we could be facing a military confrontation in the region?
Well, Dr. Koch, you're the director. You are very much involved in research in the Gulf region here in Geneva. Do you think this meeting on the 23rd, on Wednesday, do you think this is really going to resolve anything? Is this going to be something that is just yet another step, another moment to talk about something, but actually really Iran is pretty much got its foot in the ground on where it plans to go as far as its nuclear ambitions?
Well, I'm not so sure that Iran has actually decided on going ahead and pursuing a military application to its nuclear program. There have been the suggestions being made over time, over and over again. I think Iran wants to be able to control the nuclear cycle. It wants to be able to, if it makes the actual political decision to cross the threshold to produce nuclear arms, then it wants to be able to do so. But it hasn't made actually that decision so far. It's been a tug of war over the last decade between Iran and the West over what are the rights as a power to engage in peaceful nuclear energy research, to try to gain a capability in terms also of nuclear technology. Now that doesn't mean that Iran is ready to go and immediately denounce itself as another nuclear armed state, but it certainly wants to have the capability to say, well, we are in control of the nuclear cycle and we can make that step if we decide to do so. I don't think we're quite there yet, and that's something that the West keeps bringing into debate, this being completely afraid that maybe Iran has already made that decision. I think we still have some time, and that's why the diplomatic round that is coming up on Wednesday is so important.
And what about oil? I mean, obviously this is, Iran are a key oil provider at the moment. How about the situation at the moment with, say, the GCC, which we were talking before the interview, the Corporation Council, the Gulf Corporation Council, excuse me. We were talking about maybe the states would be coming together more, or basically, essentially, a grouping together of the states, providing more stability. Is this going to have an effect? A major effect on oil prices? The
Gulf region itself, the Arab Gulf states, are extremely afraid of what the Iranians might do. And they have suggested numerous times that a nuclear-armed Iran is something that is not acceptable. Because Iran continues to engage in various domestic interferences in their states. and they want to try to avoid that kind of possibility. That's why we see this announcement by King Abdullah to try to move the GCC forwards toward more strengthened union, because they want to show a united front against the Iranians and want to make sure the message gets across that Iran should not endanger the region as a whole by trying to become a nuclear armed state. So that's an important distinction to be made. It used to be 15 years ago that the Gulf could live with $25 a barrel of oil. That's no longer the case, and the break-even price for a country like Saudi Arabia now hovers more likely around $80 to $85. At the moment, they're still making budget surpluses, but their population is young, it is rising, more investment is needed into infrastructure, and as such, even domestic consumption of their own oil is rising, which then leaves less amounts to be exported. And all this puts pressure then on the budgets, and there is a need also for the Gulf states to need a certain price of oil, and it's stabilizing at about $100 a barrel right now, which the Saudi oil minister has very much indicated was a fair price at the moment. But even in the next half a year to a year, as the turmoil in the Middle East continues, I mean, the Arab Spring is something that is continuing. Certainly, we don't see an end to it at this stage. We could see that per barrel oil price increasing as far as the other GCC states are concerned.
Well, we'll have to see what happens on the 23rd on Wednesday for the rest, I suppose, as well.
It remains very interesting.
Thanks very much for coming to the studio, Dr. Koch.
Sure.
That's all we've got time for here on Dukascopy TV. Stick with us, though, as we will be speaking to our resident Dr. Frank Hollenbeck later. But until next time, goodbye.